Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, muni muni wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you are joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show, leave a 5-star review, and also please subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Ryan Jacobson. He is here to celebrate his Choose Your Path book series. Before we invite Ryan into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by I Will Love You Always and Until We Meet Again, two beautiful picture books written by Melissa Lyons. When faced with the loss of a loved one, sometimes it's hard to find the right words. Regardless of our age, we can all feel grief deep within us. That's when it's time to turn to the beautiful, comforting, and deeply insightful books. I Will Love You Always and Until We Meet Again. Loving guidance and consoling messages from our loved ones who have passed help to ease our pain and give us reasons to reach for hope and love. Get your copies today. I Will Love You Always and Until We Meet Again by Melissa Lyons. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by The Adventures of Augie Otter. It's Okay to Be You, written by Paul Dipietro. It's a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. We love this book. It's Okay to Be You is a sweet, quick read that your little ones will be sure to love. Like the little bird, many kids are not satisfied with their lives, and hopefully this book will help them cope with self-doubt and offer them an opportunity to discuss their feelings. You're going to love Augie Otter. You're going to love the book. We love the book. We think you will too. We know your kids are going to love it. It's The Adventures of Augie Otter. It's Okay to Be You, a Reading with Your Kids certified great read by our friend Paul Dipietro. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Minnesota. Our guest today is here to celebrate a series of books that I think are really fun. It's called the Choose Your Path books. Please welcome to the show the publisher and also author of some of the books, Ryan Jacobson. Hey, Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Jedley.
I'm excited to have you on. This seems like a great series of books. Tell us all about it, please.
Yeah, well, the Choose Your Path type of book is a different reading experience than what most readers are probably used to. For those of you who haven't read a Choose Your Path book before, it's sort of like playing a video game and reading a book at the same time. The reader in a Choose Your Path book is the main character, and everything that's happening to the character in the story is happening to the reader. Every 4 or 5 pages or so, the reader is put in a situation where they, as the character, need to make a choice. In my books, there's usually a right choice and a wrong choice. The right choice leads you to the next chapter or the next level of the book, and the wrong choice, well, usually it ends in disaster.
Oh my goodness! Well, give us an idea of a choice that a reader may encounter.
Oh, sure. We try to do a variety of different things. A lot of them are related to should you trust this new character or should you not trust them? Should you bring an item with you or should you leave it behind? And then probably the most common of all is should you fight or should you run?
Interesting. I'm amazed. We've had other authors on who've written these types of books, and it just seems like an incredibly difficult task as an author.
It is. The first time I did it, I actually didn't mean to write a Choose Your Path book. Back in, I think it was 2008, I wrote a book called Lost in the Wild. And it was not a Choose Your Path book. It was just a survival story about a brother and a sister who got separated from their parents and lost while on a canoe trip up in northern Minnesota in the Boundary Waters. I read it and it felt a little flat. And I was actually talking to an author friend of mine named Blake Hona, and he suggested, it would be really fun if you could turn this into a choose your path type of book. And he sort of dared me to do it. So I thought, well, okay, I'll give it a try. And I got sort of mad at him. Not really, but it was sort of like writing a second book and then combining it into the first book. And that's really what got me started on these Choose Your Path books. It is a challenge, but it's also very rewarding.
Yeah. Now, when you're setting up these decisions for kids to make, you mentioned it's kind of like being in a video game. If a kid chooses the quote unquote wrong decision, does she turn the page and say, "Oh, sorry, you're dead"?
No, we write out a scene, and I like to try to trick the readers whenever I can a little bit. Whereas if they make the wrong choice, it starts out sounding like they did make the right choice for a few paragraphs, and then things turn sour, and the reader finds out that, oops, this didn't work out. And I remember as a child when I read these types of books, you could always tell immediately when you flipped to the page because it said "the end" at the bottom of the page. So you knew, oh, I blew it. So I don't even do that. I never end with "the end." It will lead them to another page where it just says, you lost, try again, or something to that effect. I don't remember the exact verbiage, but essentially try again. Oh. And then they can go back and make the other choice.
Wow. As I was listening to you, I'm imagining if, we're back 20 years and my son was 9 again, that this would be a really fun book to read with him because he loved video games. And I tried to get into it with him, but it just, wasn't where my head was at. And I think that this would have been a lot of fun. I know that I would have chosen the wrong choices or what I thought were the wrong choices all the time on purpose just so that he could win.
Yep. We have students who like to do that. In fact, when I speak with classes, it's really fun to do these sorts of books out loud, and then let the group of students vote and decide together which choice they want to make. And sometimes the choice is really obvious, like especially at the beginning of the book, as we try to get the reader into the story, we try to make the choices pretty obvious. And as often as not, the students will vote intentionally to make the choice that they know is not the safe and right choice. But, that's part of the experience.
Yeah. Typically, how many choices will a reader have when they're diving into your books?
Sure. Most of these books are around 160 pages, and usually there's around 20 to 25 choices in each book. And again, going back to that imaginary scenario with me and my son, I'm imagining that every time there's a choice to make, it's an opportunity for discussion and conversation and perhaps even fun arguments. Yeah, absolutely. The debate over the decisions is half the fun, because as you get further and further into each book, the decisions, I think, become less and less clear. And sometimes we present arguments for and against each ahead of each choice too. So the reader has an idea of why each choice might be good or bad. And so it does promote a lot of thought, a lot of discussion, and it's a great introduction to choices and consequences too.
Yeah. Now, you said that you created the first book kind of like on a dare, and I think you said you even kind of mad at your friend for making that dare. What is it about this genre that you stuck with it? It's like, well, this is kind of pain in the neck doing books like this, but I kind of dig it, and I'm going to stay with it.
Sure. Yeah, my goal has always been, as an author, to write books that I would have wanted to read as a child. I grew up a reluctant reader. I was not much of a reader at all. I remember reading comic books, and I remember reading Sports Illustrated as a child. But of course, back in the early 80s, that did not count as reading. So I was a reluctant reader. There was nothing in the library for me. I remember my mom went on a trip to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and she came home with this Choose Your Path type of book. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember it was A Night on a Quest. And I devoured that book. I read it entirely until I made it to the end. I read the whole thing in one sitting, and I just wanted more of them.
Yeah.
And so my mom got me as many as she could find, and I was just hooked on it as a child. So coming back to as an adult, as an author, after doing the first one and seeing the reaction and feeling like I'm connecting with readers that otherwise might not want to read, it just made sense to keep doing more and more of these.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned when you were young, you read comic books and Sports Illustrated. And, of course, that wasn't considered reading at that time. And that's the mistake that I made. I didn't appreciate the fact that all the graphic novels my son was reading, I bought them for him. I supported the fact that he was reading, but I didn't give him the credit that he deserved and acknowledge that he was actually reading literature. And it's funny, too. I read Sports Illustrated. And my dad, that was one of my Christmas presents, was a subscription to Sports Illustrated. But it wasn't considered reading, which is crazy because, it wasn't Shakespeare, but it was, fairly complicated reading. There were a lot of big words in there, and there's math and statistics and analysis and everything that you would want in reading material.
Yeah, absolutely. I was probably reading at a pretty advanced level by the time I got into 6th and 7th grade, but I wasn't a reader.
Yeah.
I was in the not reading category at school.
And I'm sorry to laugh, but that's just so crazy.
No, it is. It was. I'm glad it's been fixed. I'm glad it's been remedied.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. So what is your, how many Choose Your Path books have you published so far?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably we're probably approaching 20, 15 to 20 in that ballpark. What I started to do, what I found, I tried to see it a little bit on the Choose Your Path thing. I got this idea. I was actually talking to an illustrator friend of mine, and together, we were on this road trip driving to a young writers conference. And I don't know how it came out, but we got this idea that we should, there's all these public domain books. We should, instead of, writing a brand new story and then writing a second book of consequences to the choices, why don't we just take this existing content and turn that into a Choose Your Path book? And then half the writing's already done, and we're just going to be writing the wrong choice scenes. I thought that was a great idea. I thought it was going to be simple. I thought it was going to be twice as easy. I was wrong. It was much, much harder. To take say a 150,000 word novel and try to condense that into, 20,000 words. That is quite a task for an editor. And, it actually takes longer to do these, what we call Can You Survive books, than it does to write an original story. Mm-hmm. But I think that is just another way to connect to these readers, where, a reader can be Dorothy and travel through the land of Oz to try to get back to Kansas, and Can You Survive the Wizard of Oz? Or the reader gets to be Sherlock Holmes and try to solve mysteries as this detective. Or the reader gets to fight Dracula. And in Call of the Wild, which has actually been our most popular one, the reader actually gets to be a dog in the story and live life as a dog. And Can You Survive the Call of the Wild?
Oh, wow. So neat. So neat. And you were sharing with me that you've written some of the titles. Now that you're more into publishing, it's more difficult to get out there. And I know I should never do this. It's like asking an author who's their favorite, dad who's their favorite kid. But is there a title that was really near and dear to your heart, or is there a title that was just so difficult it was so hard to write. It's like, oh, thank goodness that's finished.
I do have a favorite title. It didn't go very far. Comic books have always been my favorite. They always will be my favorite. It's always sort of been my dream to write and create my own superhero comic book series. I created what I think is a pretty good comic book called Monster Ninjas. I just haven't figured out how to sell comic books yet. So mainly, and comic books are pretty expensive to produce with all the art.
Mm-hmm.
So mainly it's sort of an itch I'm going to have to wait to scratch another day just because I can produce them. I have ideas for several different comic book series, but I haven't found how to sell them yet.
Yeah.
So I'm sticking with the I have a passion for middle grade literature. I love writing picture books. So I'm focusing on those for now.
Yeah. I imagine, I was actually speaking to an author illustrator yesterday, someone who's published over 100 books herself, and just her first book is being reissued after 40 years. And she was sharing there's an idea that she'd love to write, but it's not appropriate for picture books. And I said, well, why don't you turn it into a graphic novel? And she said, well, it will probably work as a graphic novel, but I don't have the time to do all those illustrations. I don't have them.
Well,
So,
it's fun. It is a different kind of illustrator who does, sequential art. It is always fascinating to me to go to like a comic book convention and meet illustrators and watch as they create these sketches for their fans. I mean, they can draw the most beautiful illustrations, and it takes them 90 seconds, and it just blows me away. Whereas, like a picture book illustrator tends to be more meticulous, and, it can take a picture book illustrator a year or more to create the illustrations for a picture book. Whereas, it's a different skill set. It's a different style. A comic book illustrator is churning out, 22 pages a month.
yeah.
In some cases.
Speaking of different skill sets, you were sharing with us that you started life as an author and then became a publisher. Those are two related, but two very different sets of skills. Why did you make the choice to step into the publisher role?
Sure. Well, I sort of accidentally stumbled into both. I didn't ever really think I was going to be an author. I wrote picture book manuscripts in college, mostly just for fun, as sort of a writing exercise. And I have looked back at them, and I was right. I didn't know what I was doing. They're pretty bad. But after college, my brother-in-law knows I'm a fan of comic books, and he knows I'm a writer by trade. His children's publishing company that he works for was looking for writers to help create this new series of graphic novels about figures in history and important moments in history. And so he asked me to write a couple, and that's actually how I got started as a writer. I wrote these, work for hire. They paid me a few $1,000s to create these manuscripts, and then they turned them into books. And that's how I became, an author. And I remember the first time I looked up my name online on Amazon. I thought, wow, this is so cool. I'm on Amazon. And that was a real kick. And then publishing too. I sort of accidentally became a publisher. And that actually started not long, actually I'm going to say even before I wrote those books for Capstone was the publisher. My wife is a kindergarten teacher, and she brought home the first Magic Treehouse book one day. Mm-hmm. Now, as a reluctant reader, I had never read a chapter book before in my life. I didn't even know the format existed, really. But she brought home that first Magic Treehouse, Dinosaurs Before Dark, I think it's called. And, it caught my attention. I thought, I'll give it a read. I read it, and I thought, I really like this. I really like this format. It's these condensed stories, a little longer than a picture book. But, so you can tell a more developed story, but not so long that I'll get bored of doing it and quit. So I wrote this manuscript, and I ended up writing a spy series starring Santa Claus. And I called them Santa Claus Super Spy. So I put that manuscript away. I thought, well, that was just a fun exercise. And then my wife and I decided to adopt a child. and the price tag was approaching $18,000 to do that. So we were we were desperate to make money fast. So I don't know how we decided to do it, but my wife and I talked it over, and we ultimately decided, let's self-publish this book and let's sell it at, these Christmas craft fairs that pop up all over the place, and maybe hit some schools and sell them at schools too. And that's what I did. I went to the library. There was one book on self-publishing in the library. So I went and checked it out, read it cover to cover, and somehow, I stumbled my way through, and we published this book, and I've been doing it ever since.
That's incredible. I really love that, because your company was born out of love.
Yeah, definitely.
You had this love for a child that you were choosing, and I have so much respect for foster parents and adoptive parents choosing to open up your home to a child who doesn't have a home. And I remember, I know I've told this story on the podcast, but I remember performing a magic show, and one of the things I do is hand out little green beads, and I ask, we're going to do something magical with these beads, but while we're waiting, think about something that you're grateful for. And this one kid was in the back of the room. It was up in northern Maine, and when I went out to him to retrieve the green bead, and I asked him what he was grateful for, he said, Jedley, you don't know me, but I've been a foster kid all my life, and I just was adopted, and now I have two dads, and this is the first time in my life I have a home. And
wow.
That just blew me away. And so it's so wonderful that your choice, you and your wife's choice to reach out and to bring a child, give a child a home and a life, also gave life to this publishing company and all these wonderful books.
Yeah, it's a nice story, and certainly it changed my life in more than one way by doing it.
Yeah, I think it's worthy of being a book itself.
Well, I don't know about that, but it is a nice story, and it is fun to think back. As our company continues to grow here, it's fun to think back and think about how it all started with our first son, Jonah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. What's next? What kind of books can we expect to see coming from Lake 7 Creative?
Well, I'm really embracing that choose your path format, but I'm trying to play around with it now. I wrote a couple of pretty traditional choose your path stories. Lost in the Wild was the first. Storm at the Summit of Mount Everest was the second one that I wrote with a friend of mine, Deb Mercier. Then we started doing these adaptations of classic literature, Call of the Wild, Dracula, Sherlock Holmes, those types of books. And I'm just looking for new and different wrinkles, new and different ways to do the Choose Your Path format. I started doing mysteries, and I started working with Deb Mercier, who I mentioned earlier, to do some mystery stories. But I wanted it to be more like a game even than the other Choose Your Path books are. So we developed this way to do the mysteries where the reader is finding clues throughout the book, and the clues are in a different font and they're highlighted so that the reader knows this is an important clue. And if they choose to, they can keep track of these clues on a separate piece of paper. And then later in the book, there are places where a suspect can be eliminated by some information on a page. And when the reader gets to a page where a suspect can be eliminated, there's a little magnifying glass in the bottom corner. So the reader gets a set list of suspects, and then through gathering the clues and then eliminating suspects, they can determine who did it through deductive reasoning.
Wow.
And then at the end of the story, they'll have a choice. Which of these characters do you think did it? And if they've kept track of everything, they'll know who did it. And if they don't, if they decide not to do it that way, that's okay too. They can still get to the end. But I think it's a really fun and unique way to experience a mystery story for a middle grade reader.
Yeah.
They're playing the game, and it's them who gets to solve the mystery, and it's them who gets to say, this is who did it. And then they get to find out if they're right or not.
Oh, that sounds really, really fun. And again, It sounds perfect for that parent-child interactive experience. I'm imagining, I have my little cheat sheet of clues, and my son has his little cheat sheet of clues, and maybe my daughter decides she's going to jump in on it too. And so we're all working on our own theories and discussing them. And that it just sounds like a whole lot of fun. I used to say that my show, and I still say that my magic show, is totally interactive. It sounds like your books are totally interactive and would be a lot of fun for families.
Yeah, absolutely. It is like playing a board game. It's like you're sitting around the table playing a board game, except you're actually reading a book and you're experiencing a story while you do that. Mm-hmm. We have the first two of these books are coming out in October. The first is called The Empty Cabin, and that's by Deb Mercier. And then I did one called The Ghost of Old Central School that I started, and then Deb helped me finish it. So those are going to be out mid-October, and they're the debut titles in this Detective You series, we're calling it. And I'm very excited about them because I think these books turned out great.
That's fantastic. Well, I know people are going to want to know where they can go to not only learn more about your Choose Your Path books, but be the first to find out about your Detective You series that's coming out. So where should folks go?
They can go to chooseyourpathbooks.com.
Awesome. We've had a really wonderful time speaking to the driving force behind the Choose Your Path books, the publisher and author, Ryan Jacobson. Hey, Ryan, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, Jedley. I really appreciate it.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We have two wonderful guests for you. Joni Hallaby will be here to celebrate Sweet Little You, and Mary Beth Peroni will be here to celebrate I Have Superpowers. That's the next exciting episode of the podcast. Hey, if you are anywhere in the New England area on August 6th, we would love for you to join us at the Buttonwood Park Zoo. We'll be celebrating the 1500th episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast with the wonderful folks at the zoo. Come on down, visit the animals, watch a magic show, maybe win a book, and maybe be featured on a future episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's all happening August 6th at the Buttonwood Park Zoo in beautiful New Bedford, Massachusetts. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Ryan Jacobson. Please be sure to check out his Choose Your Own Path books. Also want to thank our sponsors, I Will Love You Always, and Until We Meet Again, two beautiful and powerful and comforting books from Melissa Lyons. Also, The Adventures of Augie Otter, It's Okay to Be You. Beautiful book by Paul Dipietro. It's also a Reading with Your Kids certified great read. I want to thank my amazing team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Bel Castro, Mirabella Q, Rain Pan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.